Sometimes it isn't the world that feels heavy, it's the people in it. A friend's sarcasm, a partner's silence, a stranger's rudeness, these small moments can awaken a storm within us. Why do certain people get under our skin while others barely leave a mark? These emotional reactions often seem irrational, but they point to something far deeper, something that Carl Jung spent his life exploring. This journey begins not with them but with us, the parts of ourselves we've forgotten, denied, or disowned. As Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This isn't just a poetic idea. It's a profound key to inner work. The irritation we feel is rarely about the other person's behavior alone. Often it's a reflection of something hidden in our own psyche. Consider a person who always seeks attention. If their behavior makes your blood boil, ask yourself why. Is it simply because they're loud, or does their presence awaken something you were taught to suppress? Your own desire to be seen, to matter. Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves that we repress because they don't align with who we believe we should be. These parts don't disappear. They live in the dark corners of our psyche and project themselves onto others, especially those who mirror what we've exiled. The shadow isn't just about traits we see as negative. Sometimes it hides our boldness, our creativity, our sensuality, parts of us that were shamed or silenced. So when we see someone fully expressing what we've buried, it irritates us. Not because they're wrong, but because they're free. Jung believed that the path to wholeness begins by integrating these shadow parts. But integration requires awareness. It requires us to stop pointing outward and start looking inward. The next time someone provokes you, pause. Ask yourself, what are they showing me about me? Comment, shadow work, if you're ready to face what's hidden. In his own words, Jung stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is especially true in relationships. Think of recurring arguments with a loved one, the patterns that seem to repeat no matter how hard you try to change. These are not random, they are clues. Emotional triggers are the psyche's way of asking for healing. A partner's withdrawal may activate abandonment wounds from childhood. A friend's success may awaken feelings of inadequacy. These reactions feel overwhelming because they tap into old pain we haven't yet processed. By bringing awareness to these responses, we create space for transformation. We stop being puppets of our unconscious, and we begin to reclaim our power. Many people believe that spirituality means rising above conflict. But Jung reminds us that real growth begins by going through it. The things that annoy, disturb, or anger us are not obstacles to our peace. They are doorways to our wholeness. Think of the coworker who constantly seeks validation. Instead of dismissing them, ask, what part of me is longing to be affirmed? The act of questioning softens the reaction. It doesn't mean we excuse harmful behavior, but we begin to see people as mirrors rather than enemies. As Jung observed, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Our awakening starts with the courage to see ourselves reflected in others. When we avoid our shadow, it grows stronger. When we deny our pain, it finds ways to speak, often through the behaviors of those around us. This is why Jungian work is not a surface-level fix. It's a deep excavation of the soul. Every irritation is an invitation, every trigger is a teacher, and every difficult relationship is a mirror showing us where our healing lies. This path requires radical honesty and compassionate curiosity. It is not about blame, it is about understanding. And it starts with one powerful question: what is this person revealing about me? We often assume that our reactions to others are purely based on their behavior. But in Jungian psychology, the truth is more intimate. Our reactions are a reflection of our own inner world. Imagine walking into a room and feeling an instant dislike towards someone you've never met. Logically, there's no reason for it, but emotionally, your body tightens, your thoughts spiral, and you label them as arrogant or fake. Jung would say, this person has activated a complex within you, a network of memories, emotions, and beliefs formed earlier in life. Perhaps they remind you of someone who once made you feel small, or maybe they embody a trait you were punished for expressing. The body remembers, even when the mind forgets. Carl Jung once observed, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." This isn't about ego or self-indulgence. It's about facing the inner contradictions we carry. We are all a mixture of light and shadow. We desire to be kind, but we carry resentment. We want connection, yet we fear vulnerability. The more we deny parts of ourselves, the more we project them onto others. That person who frustrates you with their emotional intensity, perhaps they reflect the emotional vulnerability you were taught to hide. When we begin to own these parts, even a little, our reactions shift. We become less reactive, more curious, and that curiosity is the seed of transformation. In daily life, it's easy to fall into roles, especially in relationships. The caretaker, the rebel, the perfectionist. Jung called these roles personas, the masks we wear to survive in society. They help us fit in, but over time, they can become prisons. We become so identified with them that we reject anything that threatens our mask. So, when someone shows us a different way of being, perhaps more spontaneous, emotional, or assertive, it challenges our sense of identity. That challenge often feels like irritation. But beneath that surface-level discomfort is an opportunity to examine the rigidity of our self-image. Ask yourself, who am I trying to be, and what have I sacrificed to maintain that image? As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The people who bother us are often unintentional guides, pointing us toward our blind spots. Let's say you struggle with expressing anger. You were taught that it's wrong, dangerous, or unloving. So when someone in your life expresses anger easily, maybe even explosively, you judge them. But underneath that judgment might be a hidden envy, not because you want to be explosive, but because you long to express your boundaries with clarity and strength. That buried longing becomes frustration not at them, but at your own disconnection from your inner fire. By owning that fire even gently, you begin to reclaim your wholeness. This is the essence of shadow integration, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. Jung believed that healing is not about getting rid of our flaws, but seeing them with compassion and understanding. The shadow grows darker when ignored, but begins to soften when named. And it's often through our relationships, especially the challenging ones, that these shadows come into view. Think of that friend who always needs reassurance. They might reflect your own suppressed desire to be comforted, or the sibling who never takes responsibility. They might awaken your fear of being seen as selfish or irresponsible. Every projection is a puzzle piece of your own inner story, and the more of these pieces you find, the more complete you become. Take a moment now to reflect. Who irritates you the most right now? Is it a boss, a partner, a parent, a friend? What specifically about them stirs emotion in you? Not just what they do, but what it makes you feel, remember, or fear. Write it down. Sit with it. These emotional breadcrumbs will lead you back to a part of yourself that is asking to be seen. As Jung reminds us, the psyche is always guiding us toward wholeness, often in the most unexpected ways. Let us know in the comments what part of yourself you're beginning to understand. The unconscious doesn't speak in words. It speaks in symbols, emotions, and patterns. One of the most direct ways it communicates is through dreams. But another, equally powerful channel is relationship dynamics. As Jung taught, the outer world reflects the inner world. People show up in our lives not just as individuals, but as mirrors. This is especially true in emotionally charged connections. A partner's silence might echo a parent's neglect. A friend's criticism might awaken a wound from early school days. We rarely notice it consciously, but the body remembers. The nervous system tightens, the heart races, and we react, not to the person in front of us, but to a memory they unknowingly awaken. Jung encouraged us not to run from these moments, but to observe them. In his own words, the shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Each irritation is uniquely yours. It belongs to your story. Take, for instance, a woman named Clara who always felt agitated around her confident, outspoken colleague. She couldn't explain it. Objectively, her colleague wasn't rude or arrogant, just expressive. But Clara found herself judging her constantly. Through journaling and reflection, she realized she was raised in an environment where speaking up led to punishment. Her role was to be quiet, agreeable, invisible. Her colleague didn't offend her. She represented the part of herself Clara had buried. As Clara began to explore her voice, the irritation faded. Not because her colleague changed, but because Clara no longer needed to project her disowned voice onto someone else. This is the power of Jungian work. It brings the unconscious forward so healing can begin. Jung's concept of individuation is central here. It's the process of becoming the person you truly are, not the one you were told to be. Individuation means integrating the shadow, facing inner contradictions, and allowing your unique self to emerge. It's not comfortable work. It often begins with conflict, with others, and with ourselves. That's why the people who irritate us can be seen as spiritual messengers, not enemies. They arrive to disturb our comfort zones, to trigger our defenses, to make us look where we'd rather not. And in doing so, they offer us a mirror. As Jung noted, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Relationships are alchemical. They transform us, especially when we stay open. But this openness requires a gentle courage, to look inward without shame, to hold ourselves accountable without self-attack. This is not about blaming ourselves for being triggered. It's about asking, what is this reaction revealing? For example, you may be irritated by someone who seems overly needy. It may be tempting to dismiss them as dramatic, but that reaction might hide your own unmet need for emotional care, a need you've learned to silence. Instead of judging yourself or the other, ask what this dynamic wants to teach you. There is wisdom in every discomfort if we're willing to listen. Comment inner mirror if you've started to recognize the people in your life as reflections of your own inner story. This shift in perspective won't make the world painless, but it will make it meaningful. You'll begin to see that the chaos in relationships is not just noise, it's a language of the soul. And the more fluent you become, the more empowered you feel. Jung believed the soul always seeks wholeness. It will use any means necessary, including conflict, to draw us toward integration. The people who provoke us are part of that sacred process, not obstacles, but initiators. So when someone irritates you deeply, pause before you react, step back, breathe, ask, what part of me have I forgotten that this person has come to remind me of? This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it empowers you to use each interaction as a step on your inner journey. The irritation, when explored, becomes insight. The judgment becomes curiosity. The tension becomes a portal to healing, and slowly the walls you've built between yourself and others begin to dissolve. You're not just reacting anymore. You're awakening. There is a particular kind of pain that arises when someone disrespects our boundaries. It stings not only because of what they did, but because of what we didn't do. We often suppress this realization, deflecting the discomfort outward. But in Jungian psychology, this pain can be a sign that we've abandoned part of ourselves. Maybe we were taught that asserting our needs is selfish, or that saying no is unkind. So we become overly accommodating until someone takes advantage, and suddenly we're furious. But underneath the anger is grief, the grief of self-betrayal. Jung understood that the outer conflict is often a reflection of an inner one. We're not just mad at the other, we're mad that we didn't protect our own sacred space. In his words, we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Sometimes that disguise is the boundary pusher, the manipulator, the person who demands more than we can give. These individuals irritate us because they awaken a forgotten truth. We are allowed to say no. We are allowed to take up space. We are allowed to exist on our own terms. And when we don't believe that deep down, we attract people who test those limits, not because we deserve to suffer, but because our psyche is longing to reclaim what was lost. The irritation becomes a signpost pointing toward what needs to be reclaimed: our worth, our voice, our autonomy. Consider Daniel, who constantly felt drained by a friend who would call at all hours expecting emotional support. At first he obliged out of loyalty, but over time resentment grew. He began avoiding the friend, even gossiping about them, yet he never addressed the real issue. When Daniel finally sat with his discomfort, he realized that his deeper irritation wasn't just about the friend's neediness, it was about his own inability to set boundaries. He had been taught that love means self-sacrifice, that real friendship means always being available. But this belief was unsustainable. By confronting this inner narrative, Daniel slowly learned to express his needs, first with fear, then with clarity. And as he changed, the dynamic shifted. The friends surprisingly respected the boundary. The relationship survived, not despite the confrontation, but because of it. This is the alchemy of inner work. What begins as a messy emotion, irritation, anger, resentment, can become a doorway into self-respect and healing, but only if we are willing to trace the emotion back to its source. As Jung once warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And it's true. We'll blame, avoid, distract, even end relationships, just to avoid the uncomfortable truth that we've abandoned ourselves. But if we pause, breathe, and feel, we might discover that the person who irritates us is simply showing us the place where we have silenced our own truth. Have you noticed a pattern in your life where you give too much, then burn out? Or perhaps you're easily irritated by people who seem selfish when deep down you're longing to give yourself the same permission. If this resonates, write about it. Reflect on what boundary you've struggled to hold and why. Jung teaches that individuation involves reclaiming our inner authority. This doesn't mean we become rigid or cold. It means we learn to honor ourselves so we can engage with others from a place of authenticity rather than resentment. We stop performing and we start relating. In truth, the people who irritate us aren't here to punish us. They are here to awaken us. They arrive to help us see what we've denied, disowned, or devalued. They reflect the very lessons we need to learn in order to become whole. This doesn't make every relationship easy or safe, but it does give us the power to grow through them. And when we begin to understand our triggers through a Jungian lens, we no longer feel like victims of our emotional world. We become students of it. Comment self-honor if you're starting to see your irritations not as enemies, but as guides toward your forgotten truth. Beneath every irritation is a hidden story, often one we haven't told ourselves yet. Carl Jung believed that what we avoid in ourselves will find a way to confront us from the outside. This is why certain people seem to find us again and again, even in different bodies, different relationships, different chapters of life. The personalities may change, but the emotional pattern stays the same. This repetition is not coincidence, it's the psyche's attempt to bring the unconscious to light. If a lesson is unlearned, it will return until it is integrated. Jung taught that our relationships are deeply symbolic. They are the dream made flesh, the unconscious turned tangible. The people who challenge us are not just people, they are expressions of our inner world, dressed in human form. In one of his most powerful insights, Jung wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When someone irritates us, the knee-jerk response is to analyze them, their flaws, their failures, their patterns. But Jung redirects us inward. What part of me is this dynamic trying to awaken? For instance, if you're constantly triggered by people who seem emotionally cold or detached, it may reflect your own disowned need for emotional closeness. Perhaps you've learned to be strong, independent, unshakable, and in doing so, you've cut yourself off from a part of your emotional truth. Those cold people may be inviting you, painfully, to rediscover your capacity for vulnerability. Let's look at a man named Jordan. He was always irritated by his boss, an intense, commanding woman who never praised anyone, demanded excellence, and seemed emotionally distant. Jordan labeled her as cold and controlling, but when he looked deeper, he discovered that his real discomfort stemmed from childhood, where his achievements were never recognized by his emotionally unavailable father. He realized that he wasn't just seeking approval from his boss, he was reliving a dynamic that had shaped his entire self-worth. And more importantly, he was denying the ambitious, driven part of himself, the part that demanded excellence, that didn't rely on validation, that had power. He had buried that part to stay likable. The irritation became a signal, not to avoid her, but to reclaim himself. The shadow is sneaky. It doesn't always come with darkness. Sometimes it comes disguised as irritation toward those who own traits we're afraid to express. You might resent someone who seems confident and outspoken, but beneath that irritation lies your own silenced voice. You might bristle at someone's emotional openness because it reminds you of the vulnerability you never felt safe to show. Jung taught that these traits, whether boldness, softness, or even joy, do not go away when we repress them. They go underground. They become ghosts in our relationships, whispering through every trigger. The more we deny them, the more power they hold over us. But when we bring them into awareness, we free ourselves. The task then is not to fix others. It is to meet ourselves through them. Imagine each irritation as a thread, leading you inward. Follow it. Where does it take you? What belief does it uncover? What memory does it stir? This practice requires honesty, but also compassion. Jung never asked us to shame ourselves for our projections. Instead, he invited us to see them as bridges, ways for the unconscious to speak. In this way, even our most difficult interactions become opportunities for healing. Comment "inner bridge" if you've started seeing your reactions as a path to deeper self-understanding. And remember, this isn't about excusing harmful behavior or staying in toxic dynamics. Jung was clear that discernment is vital. But even when you choose to step away, you can still reflect on what the relationship awakened in you. That reflection is the gift. That awareness is the transformation. You carry it forward into every future relationship, not as baggage, but as wisdom. You become less reactive, more rooted, less fragmented, more whole, and as Jung said, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. Some of the deepest irritations we feel aren't loud or dramatic, they're subtle. A quiet unease around someone's energy, a recurring judgment that seems harmless on the surface. But in Jungian psychology, these quiet disturbances are often the most revealing. Jung believed that the unconscious doesn't only speak through nightmares or breakdowns, it whispers through small discomforts. That person who talks too much, who brags a little, who seems too spiritual or not spiritual enough. Why does it matter so much? Why does your energy shift when they walk into the room? It's in these everyday moments that the shadow slips through. The irritation is the psyche tapping on your shoulder asking, "Are you paying attention?" As Jung once wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But the journey toward our truest self isn't linear. It winds through forgotten memories, buried emotions, and the uncomfortable truths we try to avoid. We don't become who we are by staying comfortable. We become who we are by confronting what we've denied. Every irritation is a chance to notice where we've abandoned our authenticity. Perhaps you find yourself judging someone who always shares their dreams and ideas. You roll your eyes at their enthusiasm. But when you look deeper, maybe you realize you've stopped allowing yourself to dream. Maybe cynicism became your armor, and now their hopefulness feels like a threat. Not because it's wrong, but because it touches something you've lost. The people who awaken these dormant parts of us often don't know the role they're playing. And that's the beauty of Jungian insight. It helps us stop taking things so personally while simultaneously taking full responsibility for our growth. You begin to see that the world is filled with mirrors, each person reflecting a piece of your own story. Not all mirrors are flattering, but they are all instructive. Even envy, that deeply uncomfortable emotion, holds clues. If you envy someone's freedom, ask yourself where you feel trapped. If you resent someone's confidence, explore where you've silenced your own. These questions don't just ease irritation, they expand self-awareness. They bring light to the dark corners of our psyche. There's an old Jungian idea that the psyche seeks balance. It wants you to reclaim what you've disowned, and so it draws you toward people who carry what you lack. That's why opposites often attract, until they irritate each other. The organized person and the free spirit, the logical mind and the creative heart. In the beginning, these qualities seem fascinating. Over time, they become triggers. But Jung would say, this is where the real work begins. Can you learn from what irritates you? Can you see the other not as a threat, but as an opportunity to integrate what you've been missing? The goal is not to become like them, but to awaken the dormant qualities within yourself. Jung was clear. The path to wholeness requires us to see ourselves fully. Not just the good, the admirable, the spiritual, but the messy, the angry, the jealous, the small. If you can see it in yourself, you can meet it in others without so much resistance. That's why inner work transforms relationships. You stop expecting people to be your comfort, your validation, your savior, and instead, you begin to meet them from a place of grounded presence. You still feel irritation, because you're human. But now you pause, you reflect, and often you respond with understanding rather than reaction. Let us know in the comments what irritation has taught you about yourself recently. So when someone frustrates you and you feel the urge to label or lash out, take a breath. Ask, what part of me is being asked to awaken right now? That one question can shift your entire experience. It turns the moment from a battle into a classroom, from resistance into reflection. This is how you begin to reclaim your shadow, not in theory, but in the fire of real life. You don't need a perfect meditation practice or years of therapy to start this work. All you need is the willingness to look at yourself with honesty and care, and each irritation becomes an invitation, one you no longer ignore. There's a moment in every journey of self-awareness when you realize it's not about them. The person who offended you, the friend who ghosted you, the coworker who talks over you, they may have triggered something real, but the work lies within. Carl Jung was never interested in surface-level fixes. He didn't want us to just cope with pain. He wanted us to understand it, to honor it, and to let it transform us. And transformation doesn't begin with blame. It begins with the courage to ask, why does this hurt me so much? Because irritation is rarely about the present moment alone. It's a culmination of memories, beliefs, unmet needs, and unlived truths, all surfacing in one raw feeling. Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." When you push away your emotional reactions, they don't disappear, they intensify. The more you resist your shadow, the more loudly it tries to get your attention. That's why some people seem to haunt us emotionally long after they're gone. It's not just about them, it's about what they brought up in us. The patterns, the fears, the suppressed emotions, the psyche doesn't let go until the lesson is seen. So instead of resisting the irritation, welcome it, let it speak. Ask yourself, what part of me is still in pain? What part of me wasn't allowed to exist? You'll find that the irritation is a gateway, unpleasant, yes, but sacred in its purpose. Sometimes the people who irritate us most are those who remind us of ourselves. Not the self we know and like, but the self we've outgrown, rejected, or forgotten. The version of you who was needy, who was insecure, who made mistakes. Seeing those qualities in others can feel unbearable. But Jung would remind us those past selves still live within you, and they need compassion, not judgment. When we judge others harshly, it's often because we haven't forgiven a part of ourselves. Maybe you're triggered by someone's anxiety because you haven't made peace with your own. Or you're repelled by someone's arrogance because it mirrors a past version of you that once had to overcompensate to feel worthy. Healing begins the moment you recognize this inner echo. Think of someone who irritates you regularly. Sit with their image for a moment. Notice the emotions that arise. Now ask, what does this person represent to me? What story do I tell myself about them, and what story does that reveal about me? This practice isn't about intellectual analysis. It's about honest reflection. You might be surprised by what you find. Maybe that controlling parent figure you resent actually taught you where you still seek permission. Or the boastful friend you avoid shows you your unspoken hunger to be seen. These insights are tender. They require gentleness, but they also bring tremendous freedom. The more you understand your reactions, the less power they have over you. And here's the beautiful twist. The more shadow you integrate, the more empathy you develop. You begin to see others not just as irritants, but as fellow souls carrying their own pain. You no longer need to control, fix, or distance yourself so harshly. You can say no with love. You can hold boundaries without rage. You can let people be who they are without making it about your worth. This is the fruit of inner work. You become free, not from emotions, but within them. Comment shadow compassion if you've begun to feel more empathy, even toward the people who once irritated you the most. Jung's work reminds us again and again there is no healing without wholeness. And wholeness doesn't mean purity, it means integration. It means making space for the paradoxes within you, the light and the dark, the confident and the insecure, the open and the guarded. Every person who stirs something in you is helping you build that inner home, not by giving you answers, but by reflecting your questions. And in that mirror, You begin to meet your true self layer by layer, trigger by trigger, truth. The path to wholeness is not paved with comfort. It's lined with mirrors, some cracked, some foggy, all revealing more than we expect. Carl Jung never promised that inner work would be easy, only that it would be necessary. By now, you may have begun to see that your irritations are not flaws in your character or signs of spiritual failure. They are invitations. Invitations to slow down, to listen, and to turn inward rather than outward. Every time someone triggers something deep within you, it is an opportunity to explore the forgotten corners of your own psyche. And the more courage you bring to this exploration, the less you need others to change in order to feel at peace. Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration. This means we cannot find peace by rejecting the parts of ourselves that we find uncomfortable. We must bring them into the light. The jealousy, the anger, the insecurity, the shame. These are not problems to fix. They are messages from the soul, asking to be heard. When you meet someone who provokes a reaction in you, remember, they are helping you meet a part of yourself you've been avoiding. It's not about blame. It's about bravery. The bravery to say, there is something here for me. I'm ready to learn. This kind of self-inquiry isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong unfolding. You'll revisit the same themes, the same wounds, the same emotional terrain, but each time with more wisdom. 1 year, someone's arrogance enrages you. A year later, it stings less, because you've reclaimed your own self-worth. Over time, you become more spacious inside, less reactive, more compassionate, not just with others, but with yourself. Jungian growth doesn't make you flawless, it makes you real. It strips away the illusions of ego and defense and reveals the soft, sacred truth underneath. And that truth is not something you find, it's something you remember. You may notice that certain people fade from your life as you integrate more of your shadow, or perhaps you stop needing others to behave a certain way in order to feel safe. This is how freedom begins, not from isolation, but from understanding. You no longer need to exile parts of yourself, and so you stop projecting them onto others. This shifts your relationships in quiet but profound ways. You begin to draw in people who reflect your healing instead of your wounds. And when those wounds do arise again, as they will, you meet them with softness instead of fear. That is the work. That is the awakening. That is the gift. And now, if something inside you is stirring, if you feel the pull to begin this inner journey, not just in theory but in practice, then let this be your first step. Comment the day you're beginning this journey of self-discovery. Whether it's shadow integration, dream journaling, or a simple daily reflection, mark it, name it, claim it, and come back in a few weeks to let us know how far you've come. Your growth matters, not just to you, but to those you may inspire by sharing it. Jung's work was never meant to stay in books. It was meant to live through you. This is not the end of the journey, it's a door. And behind that door is the most extraordinary discovery you'll ever make, the truth of who you really are. Beneath the irritation, beneath the reaction, beneath the roles, not perfect, not finished, but whole.